going to look at solving a system of equations, and we're going to use a process or method called elimination. So here's essentially what we're going to have. We're going to have two equations, and they're going to say, okay, what is the x and y that satisfies both of these equations? So we've already looked at two other methods, and I have those videos if you want to see those. And those videos cover graphing and substitution, and this is the third method, which is elimination. So let's go ahead and look at the steps, and then we'll start working some problems. So the first step is we want to line up our equations. So basically, we want to make sure we line up the x's and the y's and everything else. Okay, pretty simple step. Then we may have to do this, we may not have to do this, but you want to multiply so that you can end up with coefficients that are the same. So let me think of how to write that. So we'll say multiply one or both equations to get same coefficient. And we want to get the same coefficient for one variable. So coefficient for, we'll just say either x or y. All right, now the third step is we're going to add / subtract our equations, and it should eliminate a variable. So that's where the elimination actually happens. All right, and it'll make more sense once we actually do it. And I actually only add, but I'll show you a little trick for that step. All right, then the fourth step is we substitute. So I'll just say sub. So we sub the value for either x or y back into the original. So back into, we'll just say back into original equation. All right. So once again, we're going to line up the x and the y. We're going to multiply one or both equations to get the same coefficient for either our x or our y. Then we're going to add to actually have the elimination process fall through. And then the last step is once we actually have an x or a y, we can just plug that back into the original to find the other value. So let's look at a problem real quick, because honestly, once we go through the problem, it makes way more sense than the actual steps do, I think. So x plus 7y equals negative 17, or actually it's just positive 17. And then x minus y equals negative 7. All right, so now what you want to look for first is, do I have the same coefficient anywhere? Okay, so in my two separate equations, I'm looking for the same coefficient. Now, if you notice, the coefficient for each of these x terms is 1. So everything's lined up for step 1. Now, I don't even have to multiply this by a number to get the same coefficient. I already have the same coefficient. So this is where my elimination is going to happen. Now, here's what I would do if I were you as a step to make sure you get your signs correct. Notice that these two signs are the same. So if I were to add these two, it would give me 2x, so they would not cancel. Now, if I were to subtract these two things, it would cancel. However, here's what you really have to do. If you're subtracting both equations, you have to actually subtract this entire, and actually let me get rid of this. You have to subtract this entire bottom equation. So here's what you can do as just a good rule of thumb. Rewrite your first equation and then distribute a negative to every term in your second equation. So that basically means just flip the signs of all these. So make this first term negative x, the second term becomes plus y, and the last term, or on the right side of the equal sign, becomes positive 7. Now, we can just add or subtract depending on what sign is to the left of each term. So like right here, negative x just means minus x. So this is going to cancel. 7y plus y gives me 8y. I bring down my equal sign, and then 17 plus 17 gives me 24. All right, so once again, if you need to subtract, what you can do is distribute a negative, and it will help you with the signs. All right, so now we just need to finish this off by dividing by 8, and we actually just found that y is equal to 3. So now, I have y equals 3, so we're going to go back to the very beginning, and I'll get rid of this and rewrite some of this. So now we're going to take our two original equations, and we're going to say, I know that y is equal to 3, so that means I can substitute 3 back in for one of these y values, and then I'll have my x value. So I think the bottom looks easier to plug into, so we'll say x minus, then we're going to substitute in 3 equals negative 7. Now all we have to do to solve this is add 3, and we will have x equals negative 4. So now, here's x, here's y, so my final answer is negative 4, 3. And that's exactly what elimination looks like. Now, let's look at another one real quick just so you can see it. So, and actually we may look at a couple more. So, 3x plus 2y equals 22. And then we have 5x minus 2y equals 42. So now, let's look first for, make sure we have everything lined up, which it is. X's are over x's, y's are over y's, number over number. So now we want to make sure we have the same coefficient. And if you notice, these two coefficients are the same. They're both 2. Also, if you notice, if I were to add these two, basically that means I could add this entire equation. And if I were to add here, that would actually already cancel. So I don't even need to multiply by anything. I don't need to multiply by a negative 1 here because the signs are already alternating. So that means these two y values, or the two y's, are both going to cancel. So now 3x plus 5x gives me 8x equal to 64. And now I'm about to solve for the x's because I just eliminated the y's. So I would divide here, x equals 8. So now I know x equals 8. So then once again, I can take that. I can start over from the beginning and say, all right, I have 3x plus 2y equals 22. And then I have 5x minus 2y equals 42. And I just found x equals 8. So now I take that x equals 8, and I can plug it in for this x value, or I could plug it in for this x value. And honestly, it doesn't look like there's much difference in between the two. I'll probably just stick with the first equation. So we'll say 3 times 8 plus 2y equals 22. So 24 plus 2y equals 22. Now we will subtract 24, 2y equals negative 2. So then y equals negative 1. And now, lucky for us, we have our x and our y. So the ordered pair is 8, negative 1. All right, so now let's look at another option, because those two honestly were more straightforward and more basic. This is where things start to get a little tricky, but I'll show you two more to try to help you out with the tricks that you'll see. So 4x minus 9y equals negative 42. Let's say we have x plus 5y equals 4. All right, so now let's go back to the very beginning. The x's and y's and numbers are lined up, so we're good there. Now, let's see if we can find any coefficients that are the same. But here's the issue. This coefficient is 1. This coefficient's 4. We have a negative 9 and a 5. Those are not the same. So we're kind of stuck in no man's land as far as we can't just cancel right away. Or we can't just multiply by a negative and cancel. But here's what we can do. We could multiply, and let's say we want to use this second equation. We could multiply this second equation by a number that would end up with us getting 4x here. Now, what number would that be? Well, we would just multiply by 4. Now, here's what you can do if you want to do two things in one, which is a trick I would use. If I make both of these 4x, that's going to give me 8x, but I want them to eliminate or cancel. So what could I do with 4 to make sure that cancellation happens? I could multiply by -4. So then what you can do, rewrite your top equation to make sure we don't lose anything. Then your bottom equation, just multiply, and you're going to distribute -4 to each of these terms in your problem. So we're going to say this is -4x or -4x. This would become -20y, and then this would become -16. All right, now I can just act like I'm adding, and basically all the signs are just going to tell me exactly what to do. 4x minus 4x is going to cancel. -9y minus 20y is going to be -29y equal to, and this would give me -58. So then I can divide by -29, and I'm going to know what y is. Y is equal to +2. All right, so once again, you can multiply by a coefficient or by a number at any point. Just make sure you think about, does it need to be a positive or a negative? That way you can do 2 steps in one. All right, so now let's finish this one off. 4x minus 9y equals -42. And then our original equation was x plus 5y equals 4. But we just found y is equal to 2, so now we're going to plug that back in to one of the original problems for y, and I'm going to choose the bottom. So x plus 5 times 2 equals 4. X plus 10 equals 4. We're going to subtract 10, and x is going to equal -6. So good thing for us, we now have x and we have y, so our ordered pair, -6, 2, and we're finished. All right, let me show you one more. This is the hardest one to do, but let's see if you can figure it out. So let's say I have 5x plus 3y equals -7. Then I have 2x plus 7y equals 3. So do we have, well, is everything lined up, first of all? Yeah, it is. X's are lined up, Y's are lined up. This is lined up. All right, now see if you can pause the video and figure out how am I supposed to get 2 of the same coefficients? Because the second question is, are my coefficients the same? This x coefficient is 5, this one is 2, this is 3 and 7, so nothing's matching. So see if you can figure out what we should do here. All right, so now the issue is there's not a number that I could multiply 2 by to make it 5. There's also not a number I could multiply 7 by to make it 3. So in this case, it's a special case where you have to multiply both equations. And the easiest way to do this is take your smaller numbers, or I always take the smaller numbers, and you're going to take this 2, and it tells you to multiply 2 up here. You're going to take this 5, and it tells you to multiply 5 down here to this equation. So let me get rid of all that. So we can take the lead coefficient, or, I mean, we could use 3 and 7 if we want, but you're essentially going to multiply the 2 and the 5 to the opposite equation, because that's going to give us the same number, and we'll be good to go. Now, the only thing you've got to do is this. Both of these signs are going to end up being 10x and 10x, and they're going to be positive. So if we want to make one negative, we need to choose to make 2 negative or 5 negative. I'll just make the 5 negative. All right, so now here are my new equations. The top's going to be 10x plus 6y equals -14. The second equation is going to be -10x minus 35y equals -15. So now you can pretty easily see what's going to cancel. My 10s with the x's are going to cancel, and then I can just use the sign to the left to tell me what operation to do with 35y. I'm going to say 35 minus, or 6y minus 35y, which gives me -29y, and that equals -29. So then I'm going to divide both sides by, which I never use this color, but I'm going to divide both sides by -29, and y is equal to +1. So Now, same step as before, we're going to take that y equals positive 1, and we're going to make sure we use our original equations. You don't want to use what you don't want to use the product you got after you multiplied. You want to make sure you use the original equations. So these were actually the two original equations. We want to say, okay, if y is equal to 1, I can plug that in here or here to find my x value. And it doesn't really matter which one. I'll plug it into the second one. 2x plus 7, because it's going to be 7 times 1 equals 3. So now we're going to subtract 7. Subtract 7. That was a terrible line. 2x is going to be equal to negative 4. Then we're going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. So x equals negative 2. So once again, lucky for us, we have an x, we have a y. There's my two answers. So once again, elimination is all about trying to eliminate something, which is why it's called elimination. So your goal is to try to get the same coefficients for either your x's or your y's. But once again, keep in mind some of the tricks we talked about on making your life easy, because I've done this quite a bit and I know some of the tricks to make your life easier. So I would be sure to try to use those. But yeah, that's pretty much it for elimination. It's straightforward once you get used to it. So give it a shot and then reach out if you need any help.